welcome to this Network 18 special. I'm Shereen Bhan and we're coming to you from Davos, where the conversation is about sustainability, climate change and the consequences of inaction. I have to say the headliner this year is not President Trump, it's Greta Thunberg, the feisty vocal climate activist who's taking the message to Davos and making her intent to continue the fight for climate change and ensure that governments and business leaders act, taking that message through Davos. Today we're going to be discussing the exact same issues, what corporate India can do, what global brands like Reckitt Benckiser can do to help, and of course where we stand when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically when we talk about the access to clean water. The report card isn't looking particularly good. Joining me on the panel today, very special guests. Let me start with Eleanor Allen, the CEO for Water for People. Also with us on the program, Deepak Bagla, the Managing Director and CEO of Invest India, and Miguel Pestena, the Senior Vice President, Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at RB Hygiene and Home. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Let me start by asking you, Miguel, as I pointed out, this is the topic of conversation here in Davos. While companies have made an attempt and an effort to try and address the challenge of climate change, perhaps a lot more needs to be done. How do you, as a company, approach this?
Well, first thing to say is I'm really glad that it is here at Davos that we as business are coming together to talk about taking action on climate change. It's pretty clear that more needs to be done right across the board. We are talking about a decade of delivery and the fact that we need to invest more as businesses and through our brands in helping consumers, particularly in terms of changing their behaviors, taking actions, some of those small actions they need to do every day to make a difference. I think it's fair to say that if you look at we're not just talking about climate change here, we're also talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, which is something that's very, very important and very near and dear to my heart. And when you look at the goals, they're all linked. So climate change is linked to everything. It links across to water and sanitation, which is something else we're talking about here today. Every goal interconnects, interrelated. And we as a business have to look at our footprint and determine how we can best make a positive net contribution. What it is that we can do in our everyday business operations and through the power of our brands to make a meaningful difference.
I'll talk to you about specifics on what you are doing with individual brands in just a second. But Eleanor, if I can come to you now. As I pointed out, the report card, especially when we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals on access to clean water and sanitation, not looking particularly good, and in all probability, we're going to miss the target. What do you believe is the problem that needs fixing today?
Well, water, I'm happy it's on the forefront because it is a global crisis. And if we think about where we are in the world, there's still about 1 in 2 people don't have access to safe water. So Water for People, our mission is to bring sustainable service delivery to everyone that doesn't have it today and keep that service going forever. So if you look at the Indian context, there's about 600 million people in India still without this basic service. And that's what we're about, helping bring this basic service so everyone can have the quality of life that they deserve.
Deepak, just on that point, the government has launched the Jan Shakti mission. We've got a Jan Shakti ministry now to look at the issue of water specifically. In terms of public-private collaboration, and this is going to require that, what do you believe needs to be done to flesh out a roadmap to include the private sector to be able to address the deficit that Eleanor just spoke of?
So one, Shereen, when you said it doesn't look good, that's an understatement. It's actually really serious. You mentioned 600 million. So what the government now is doing is, and last year they launched it, and I must, by the way, compliment you and your channel.
Thank you.
They launched this entire effort here. The government and the Prime Minister's stated objective, next 48 months, tap water to 900 million people in India. This is the scale of the challenge which we are sitting on. The essential scale of this challenge is that it's not just about water. It is social, it's economic, it's political. It is economic because if I don't do anything now, by 2025, I would have lost 6% of my GDP. Social, we all know about it. I mean, waterborne diseases, we have 7 million every year.
Yeah.
Put that over 5 years, will be the entire population of the UK. So the numbers are fairly severe. And the other challenge which we are facing in India is that we've got to look at it, and that's what the Prime Minister and this entire program is doing, Shereen, is on a 360 basis. Starting from giving them healthcare, which is the world's largest healthcare program which he launched, to get them connectivity by a road, to get a mindset change You know, every time you buy a kg of rice, you're taking 3,500 liters of water. Just imagine, did you ever think of it when you order that bowl of rice, how much water you've taken away? So that's an entire mindset change which has to happen. And in addition to that, 700,000 villages. We've got to take that water pipe to each one of those. And each one of those 900 million individuals.
Yes.
And to get them drinking water. And to a country where close to half of our entire water is from groundwater. And the challenge in the groundwater being the salinity, there's fluoride, there's arsenic.
And it's depleting.
And it's depleting. I mean, you know, 11 of our 20 big cities have completely scarce for water.
Yes.
So the challenge is there, and that is where this huge program has been instituted. It's a mission. The government is totally focused on it. It's going to be a $51 billion spend in the next 48 months. And I think it's for all of us to be together to make it happen, the private sector and the government and the people themselves.
Absolutely.
This program will have to be driven bottom up. It can't be top down.
Yes, PPP of a different kind is what we require. But you know, on the point that you made about changing agricultural practices, for instance, and not being able to grow as much paddy as we currently do, which has led to states like Punjab facing a problem with water, etc. That, of course, will require serious government intervention. But Miguel, let me ask you about what you're doing at RB, for instance. The way that you're innovating the products to ensure that there will be less water use. I mean, you're working across the home and hygiene segments, and you know that requires a lot of water consumption. So, how is the innovation process now being oriented to being able to achieve this goal?
First thing to know is, you know, as a business, our mission is to help to create a cleaner world, and at the heart of that, water and the use of water is really key. Now, if you think about what you just said about how much water we use in agriculture, well, also about 10% of that water gets used in the home, and 60% of that is used for cleaning. So one of the things we can definitely do to help is to innovate products that are more water efficient, that use less water. And that's one step we can play. But the other thing we can do is make people understand why water matters. You know, literally every drop counts, and help them to not only be more aware of this, but actually start to institute behavioural change. Because I think we need to understand that how people use and conserve water is a critical part of the solution as well.
You spoke of behavioural change, and that's what the whole nudge theory is about, is getting people to adopt a different kind of behavioural lifestyle. Eleanor, what are you seeing now in the way that brands are communicating or governments are communicating, creating awareness around this? You know, what are the key takeaways that we should learn from, and the mistakes that we should avoid?
Well, I think it's really interesting, the three of us here together, because this is really something we're seeing at Water for People.
We need the three of you to be together.
Because bringing us together creates a much more influential voice about changing behaviors. So it's first making people aware of the water scarcity issues, especially in India. I mean,
is there enough data, by the way? Because this is a problem that we deal with in India specifically on a lot of issues, not just water. But is there enough data on how serious the problem is, how it can be addressed across different regions?
There's a lot of data, and we know that the more people we connect, the more the demand will grow. We know the demand is going to double over the next 10 years when we get to 2030 in India especially. And we also know that the amount of water resources that the demand is 16% of the world, but it's only 4% of the water resources of the world. So we have to be aware, and then we have to act and conserve, and also build in the reserves to store the water, and then measure the impact before and after. So everyone can do their part in the households, but it's also raising the consciousness of the whole community about reducing water use where we don't need to, and about knowing what the water footprint is of the rice we eat and everything we do. And all of those things together help us conserve our precious resource and steward water better.
I think just to build off this, I think one of the things that we talk about data, but it's also how we use and apply that. And I think one of the things that brands, we, for example, have the Harpic brand in India. It's one of the most trusted sanitation brands in India. And so we have the ability to use our voice to help to not just provide people with data, but also to understand what they can do in ways and in forms that they can relate to. Because I think if it's just a data narrative, it's not very motivating. I mean, and in fact, in many cases, it's quite frightening. So you have to connect to the individual, and that's the thing. I think one of the great things about brands is that they can do that, and we play that role. But as I said, it's in partnership, because so much of what we do, and we've done that, of course, in sanitation, and the efforts that India has made tremendous strides in addressing the sanitation gap. But obviously now water is linked. I mean, they're intrinsically linked. That's why we talk about WASH. And I think these two things are so inextricably linked, and a brand like Harpic plays that role. It's at the heart of everything we do as a business and as a brand.
Let me take on that one, Shereen. I don't think awareness is an issue in India. You know, they say that you will only realize the worth of water when you have to carry its load on your head and walk for 5 miles.
It's really heavy.
And when 12% of the world's population lives in my villages, those women do it every day.
I know.
So you need the data maybe when you want to construct a policy. But while constructing that policy again, this time the government is going to do it bottom up. So look at me. I've got 17% of the world's population, 15% of the world's livestock. You've given me just 4% of the world's water reservoir. I'm already in a short thing. And even for us sitting in the cities, Shereen, you and I both are in Delhi. We get water 2 hours in the morning, or maybe 3. And that's in the capital of the city. So please understand, where awareness is concerned, I think all of us are extremely aware of that issue. It is now that action is now going to start. And when it's about passing the baton, it's not passing. We all three have to hold it together.
That is true.
Let me tell you, the moment we start passing it on, it's gone.
I'm with you. I just can't quite reach yours.
So the thing on this one is that there is still a long way to go. But the best thing which is happening, you have a government for the first time which has taken a concerted action and a 360 approach to make it happen, and make it happen bottom up. I'm repeating bottom up every time because that's the only way this is going to change.
I agree.
No, that's absolutely right. We do need a bottom-up approach. But, you know, I want to get the three of you to also share some best practices, things that are working elsewhere that perhaps we could learn from. What's happening on water conservation that perhaps we could learn from, for instance, Eleanor?
Well, I think one thing that is working in India that we're going to see again with this program is the political will of government. And so this is going to lead other countries in the world just making it happen, just like the Swachh Bharat did. So what we also see in other places that we could learn from in India is just the importance of conserving watersheds and the water resources, recharging the aquifers, especially because of the groundwater issues, and really bringing in those governance models to keep the systems going. And that's one thing at Water for People that's really important. Building infrastructure is one part, but maintaining and operating and creating the professionals that will run those systems, that's a huge new career opportunity for many people in India. And that's what we can also learn from other countries around the world that have been along on the journey.
And I think actually the learning of sanitation in India is exactly the same, which is it's one thing to provide a toilet, but it's another thing to
use it.
That's right.
Use it appropriately and maintain it. And maintenance, and of course that's the heart of what we do. Of course, we sell the products that are cleaning the toilets. So I think that understanding and how you understand that you have to create an ecosystem that works and is sustainable in the real sense of the word. So one thing to build the infrastructure, another thing to sustain and maintain it.
You know, I'll take it from there. One, if it is a demand-led system, you will always have solutions which are important and valid to that local perspective. And that is what is happening now. So you need to create demand-led things instead of creating solutions on your own and imposing them on others. The second big thing which is happening in India, and by the way, I must tell you one small point on that separately. You know, we are the #1 R&D destination in the world for multinationals opening R&D centers outside of their home country. Now, why do I tell you that? Innovation is going to be the most critical element as one of those jigsaw pieces in getting the solution. And that is what we are seeing, an amazing level of startups and innovations, which are from the small towns and cities, and coming up with very sustainable, price-effective solutions with local material to these situations. And that is where we will be able to address these challenges and also bring in solutions which might be applicable to another 7 billion of the world's population across the globe.
Yes, India is being used as an incubator for innovation, low-cost innovation that can be taken to the rest of the world. But, speaking of the work that RB is doing, how do you see yourself? I know that the strategy is to create brands with a purpose, but how do you sort of see yourself as a global citizen with the various countries that you operate in, collaborating with civil society, with governments, etc.? What is the vision that you see for yourself going forward?
Well, that's a very big question, and I'll do my best to answer it. So, firstly, I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at Reckitt Benckiser at RB. And so it's really in my DNA, because I look at every one of these goals I talked about earlier. We talk about the 17 goals, but really it's 16 if you count the 17th one as partnership. Yes. And really, but the reason it's there is because everyone begins to understand more and more that the solutions to the other 16 can only work if you create the partnership models, the new models of partnership and collaboration with a lot of different stakeholders. And so most of the issues you look at often from a global perspective, but the solutions lie in local collaboration and local solutions. And therefore, it's really understanding that our footprint as a business is we're a global business. We sell 20 million products every day to people around the world. And we see it as our obligation to provide them with the most nutritious, healthy, and hygienic products. And actually, we think that by doing that, we make a really meaningful contribution to people's lives and actually to the communities that they live in. So many of these things are driving benefits that extend beyond purely providing someone with basic sanitation. Also enables them to go to school every day, also enables them to attain a better education, also then enables them to ultimately be able to get a better job and to be part of, to provide for their family. And therefore, these things may sound small, but in many ways, a small action like that, like a basic hand washing or basic sanitation, is a hugely impactful thing in a person's life. And so we take that responsibility very, very seriously. And I think that the way we see ourselves playing a role is that we have the power of our brands to make a difference. And that's where we try and look at them through three lenses. One is that we can do a lot in terms of the products itself, the benefit that the product can bring. Sure. Improving hygiene, improving sanitation, improving basic health. The second thing is through behavioural change and incentivizing that behavioural change, and helping to educate and raise awareness is critical to that. And I think that this third one is really to be a voice, to advocate, and to be a willing advocate, to stand up and speak for these issues, because in essence we think of them as a right and not a privilege. And in so many parts of the world today, people still don't really think of them in that way. So that's how I see our role, and that's the role that we hope to bring to bear through the partnerships that we forge with others.
Eleanor, what would you like to see being prioritized, given where we are today in 2020, at the start of 2020, at the start of a new decade? What would you like to see being prioritized, given the current situation on the ground?
I think priorities are to get the services done over the next 5 years, which is the government mandate, but also going back to the innovation, figuring out different ways we can do things instead of doing the same thing. There are ways we can leapfrog technologies, we can save money in the infrastructure side as we change the behaviors, and to really accelerate the operation and maintenance side. I know we're going to come up and learn things in the next few years that we don't even know we're going to learn yet, and this is going to become a model for other countries too, to see what happened in India during this program. And I think that's actually really helpful as we go towards 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And I like to say that number 6 underpins everything, because all the Sustainable Development Goals need water and sanitation. So we touch them all, including 17. So I'm really excited to see. I'm an engineer, so I love the tech part, but I'm also know that solving this issue, the technology is not the end game. It's an added assistance, because it's all about the people and the governance and the leadership that are going to solve this crisis.
Absolutely, and it has to all come together. Deepak, I'm going to end by asking you, we just heard here from Miguel saying that corporations also need to get involved with advocacy. From an Indian ecosystem perspective, the government has of course announced the Jal Shakti mission. What is the ask from India Inc.? I
think one, the focus for the next 48 months is to get it executed. and to get that tap and that water, at least 50 liters of it on a daily basis to those 900 million individuals. That has to be done. What is it required from the India Inc.? One, it has to be a partnership. It has to work together. But more importantly, Miguel, let me tell you, even from your perspective, which is the private sector perspective, no longer is the goal of a corporate only to enhance a balance sheet and its margins.
No, we're talking about stakeholder capitalism.
Exactly. Right? This is what we are talking about. It's about what it is to be a good global citizen.
Yes.
And nowhere else will you get a better opportunity for your social impact investing than the $51 billion opportunity I'm giving you now for the next 48 months.
That's a sales pitch if I ever heard one. That's a sales pitch.
No,
Well done.
it's an opportunity.
But it is an opportunity, yes.
And we take it in that spirit.
Done.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here today, for your thoughts, your ideas, and to forge this partnership, which we hope will be a sustainable one and gather much more momentum to ensure that we do achieve the objectives and that the SDG number 6 is on top of everybody's agenda. Eleanor, Miguel, and Mr. Bagla, thanks very much for joining us here. With that, it is time for us to wrap things up here on this Network 18 special from Davos. For now, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.